Hi everybody, it's Adam from LUCIDPIXUL. I'm very happy you're here to join me today. I want to talk about something that has been at the crux of working as an artist for as long as art has existed to a certain degree. There was a period in art history, if you've ever studied art history, where in order to be an artist, you needed to already have a very solid financial base. Getting a team of people together who could go and gather the ingredients you needed to go and mix different types of precious gems or flowers to make paints, to running a studio, to all that kind of stuff. Moving forward in time, into like the 1950s and 60s and 70s and so on and so forth, art became a lot more accessible. You know, being an oil painter, working in oil or egg tempera or acrylic or whatever the case might be, made being a self-functioning artist a lot easier, but making a career very difficult. Being an artist very often meant being a freelance illustrator who got jobs when they got jobs, so to speak. Working as a fine artist, where you really didn't make any money unless you had a real name for yourself, because selling canvases and becoming popular and selling your stuff in a gallery could be extremely difficult and challenging and very competitive. And I even remember my mother telling me back when she was in university studying fine arts, the joke in the university used to be a BFA, which of course stands for Bachelor of Fine Arts. They used to joke and say it was a Bachelor of F all, because basically a degree wouldn't get you a job. You were still starving whether or not you had a degree, so it didn't really matter. But times have changed, and I've noticed that especially in the last 6-7 years, there have been huge transformations in the career of an artist. And the major reason for this is it has to do with the insecurity that a lot of studios have had over the years with the potential of their private, their intellectual property being leaked out into the public. Working digitally, working in Photoshop, transferring things digitally back and forth between a studio, there's that chance of artwork being leaked out to the public, ruining the launch of something or whatever the case might be, which can be very often very devastating for a company, right? However, I made a very interesting discovery, a very big discovery that really transformed my career and made me realize something when I was working on the Disney show in Ottawa. The job was in Ottawa, but as you may or may not know, I'm based in Montreal and my family lives in Montreal as well. And it was the only job I could get. It was a very good job, mind you. Working for a Disney show is always a very good job. It's a very reputable job at least. But it was in Ottawa. I had a new baby in the house. So I had 3 kids at this point, and one of them being a very young child. The only way I could work in my particular field was to find a place to live in Ottawa, which I did, which ended up being one of the most wonderful places on earth, but that's a story for another day. And spending 5.5 out of 7 days away from my family. I had to jump in the car every Sunday afternoon to beat the night time, because I didn't like driving at night. Drive back to Ottawa. So I'd be in Ottawa in the morning to start my job. I would work from Monday to Friday, and then Friday, as soon as I was finished my shift, I would hop back in my car and drive back to Montreal, and I did that for over 6-7 months. It was a really rough time. It was particularly rough on my wife. It was rough on me. It was rough on my kids, but it was necessary because I had to work. The irony being, all of my artists didn't work in-house. They were all freelancers. Confided, they were freelancers that worked within the Ottawa, Ontario area, but they didn't work in-house. So I'm thinking to myself, why are you making me drive all the way to Ottawa and not see my family for 5 days a week? But none of your artists do. None of the artists that I was supervising actually worked in-house. If your fear is the fact that you're afraid that information is going to get leaked, well, as you know, distance doesn't matter when it comes to the online world. If something's leaked on the internet, it's leaked worldwide, right? So whether or not you work in Bangladesh or Russia or China or Colombia or Montreal or Ottawa, if stuff gets leaked on the internet, it gets leaked on the internet. But as I'm noticing this, I'm also noticing something else. Studios are starting to finally be able to relax, loosen the leash a little bit, and allow for more and more freelance work, because they're realizing that, number one, their phobia of stuff being leaked in the first place is very traceable, You know, if I give artwork to an artist and that artwork ends up on the internet, I know who to point my finger at, right? So whether or not somebody steals it using a USB from the studio or somebody just decides to post it on Facebook is irrelevant. So students are starting to warm up more and more to the prospect of hiring people internationally. And as such, studios are saving themselves money on the expense of running a studio and having enough electricity, computing power, and physical space to hire artists. And now all they need to do is just look somebody up online and send them a contract. Job done. It's a lot less expensive for the studio. It gives them access to an international bank of artists that don't have to move, don't have to relocate. They don't have to pay for the relocation either. It's a win-win situation for everybody. So as such, the employability, your ability to find work is no longer dependent on your geographical location, which was the big deal for me. A lot of my students ask me about working in Montreal. They want to move to Montreal. And they say, what are studios like in Montreal? And my response to that is, if you work in 3D and you want to work specifically in gaming, and now in Montreal we're getting things like Moving Picture Company and Frame Store and all these different big studios, these film studios. If you work in 3D and do special effects, there's lots of work to be had in Montreal. For 2D art and concept and illustration and animation, not so much. They hire these tiny little, like take like Ubisoft for instance, they'll hire this tiny little niche of like 2 or 3 like senior concept artists to work on the entire project. They have a big team of 3D artists and programmers and game designers and level designers, but they have a very small niche team of actual 2D concept artists and illustrators. So finding work in Montreal for 2D art, not so freaking easy. As I know, I had to freaking move to Ottawa to get a job, right? But that's not the case anymore. Since I came back to Montreal, since I made this realization, I decided, well, my first original idea was I'm going to start an online mentorship, an online school, because teaching is probably my #1 biggest passion on earth. Start an online school as a side project and work as a freelancer as more of my regular source of income. Within a week, confided, you know, I do have the portfolio, I do have the skill and all that kind of stuff. Within a week, I discovered I saw a job posting for Fantasy Flight Games on LinkedIn. I sent my application. They sent me my first job. They sent me my first illustration to do. It was that quick and easy. Now, Fantasy Flight is based in the United States. I'm in Montreal, but they don't care. I don't care. Working from distance doesn't matter. As long as I have my whole setup here, I have a nicer setup. My setup at home is better than any studio I've ever worked at, by far. Okay, I have a much nicer setup. I do the work, I send them the roughs, they send me feedback, I send them the finals, I get paid, and that's what it's been like since. However, it turned out a little bit differently for me because LUCIDPIXUL, my mentorship, really did well, a lot better and a lot faster than I thought it would. That became my full-time job, and Fantasy Flight was something that I could do on the side, but now I can kind of haggle and manage multiple jobs at the same time and still be able to pick up my daughter from the school bus and still be able to tuck my kids in at night and still be a dad and still be present and be able to organize my life around that. What this is teaching me, what this has taught me, and what I want to pass to you, and I want to pass to the entire artistic world, the entire artistic industry, is you have to make a very big realization. We are no longer at the bottom of the food chain. We have been forever. We used to chase after that bachelor of F all. We used to be struggling on the side, you know, see these bloody brilliant musicians and visual artists that were doing these stupid characters or portraits, you know, at the old port so that they could make a couple of bucks. That's not the case anymore. You now have the freedom to be able to work anywhere you want worldwide. If you live in a tiny little town of 600 people in Colombia, or if you live in Brazil, or if you live in Russia, or if you live in Belgium, or anywhere in the world, you can work for anybody anywhere in the world as long as you have the skill. As long as you have the skills necessary to work, and you've got what the studio is looking for, and you understand the professional workflow, the world's your oyster, literally. And I'm going to add something to this. A big deal. I've been watching a lot of research on the advancement of robotics and stuff like that. Not on purpose. I'm not out looking for it. It's just something that's kind of found me. And I remember hearing a special on the radio, on Canadian radio, maybe about a year and a half ago or something like that, that was refreshed and emphasized on the latest episodes of Veritasium 2. I'll link it in the description below if you want to go check it out. Where I believe his name's Daniel. He's a guy originally from Vancouver, where he talks about the future of robotics and how robotics is taking over a lot of industries. It's replacing a lot of human jobs. And a lot of people are worried about this, but at the same time, it's very exciting because it's replacing a lot of these repetitive stress injury, burnout type of jobs, like, factory production and stuff like that, that employ thousands and thousands of people. It's already replaced a lot of these jobs. And the prediction being, if it continues in this trend, and there's a very good probability that it will be this way, that if we go forward the next 10 years, a huge percentage of the human-based working force is going to be replaced with robotics just because of the advancement of robotics. And this is across multiple major fields. But in both that radio excerpt that I heard, as well as in the Veritasium, as well as what I've been researching online, that's all except for one type of work. One type of work, not one job, but one type of work. Creative. Because what people in robotics, what all of these incredibly brilliant minds in robotics are learning very quickly, mimicking and being able to do what the creative mind is capable of doing. Law, information-based, is something far beyond what all of these different types of jobs are all information-based jobs. The jobs that robotics are replacing are jobs that are automated, that are information-based. If learning about the human body, the endocrine system, the nervous system, the muscular system, learning about how the function of the body works and where everything's placed and how to use different instruments to be able to do certain types of surgery and what type of medicines to administer and so on and so forth, is something that a computer can do. Now, confided, a computer cannot replace the human aspect of medicine. But as you may know, if you're anybody who's ever lived with an autoimmune disease or somebody who's lived with any kind of a long-term ailment, doctors are so overworked and burnt out that a lot of the humanity gets stripped out of these people, unfortunately, because they just can't keep up with the load. There's so much demand for health services that medicine can't keep up, so a lot of the humanity gets stripped out of it in the first place. So if anything, robotics is going to be replacing a lot of these automated type jobs that doctors have to do, the administration side of jobs, the administering of different types of prescriptions and stuff like that, that doctors have to use up their time to do, and they can dedicate their time to spending more quality time with a lot of these people are worried about losing their jobs, but the creative mind functions very differently. The creative mind is spontaneous. It creates synapses using many different parts of your brain in real time. Just to give you an example of how I very often teach the creative process to my students, a lot of people have this belief that the creative mind is sitting and staring at a blank surface and then going, there we go, masterpiece. That's not how the creative mind works. 99% of what the creative mind is creating synapses, connections between different seemingly abstract things in your own way, and bridging those bits of information together to create something new. That way you're bridging the gap between something that already exists, but something you've never seen before. And then you filter it through yourself, making it your own, personalizing it. I remember David Bowie being interviewed. I was watching a lot of interviews on David Bowie when he, just after he passed away. And he was asked the question by one of the interviewers, do you ever steal anybody else's work? And he says, yeah, of course. I steal other people's work all the time. And the guy kind of got taken back by that. And he goes, that's what the creative process is. I listen to a song by Beethoven. I listen to something by Skid Row. I listen to something by Metallica. I listen to something by Oscar de Leon. And I fit it together. And all of these sounds resonate to me. These rhythms, these sounds, these vibrations resonate through me in a certain way. I have a certain unique comprehension of them. And then I filter it through and I give it that little 2% of David Bowie magic to it. And that's it. That's my contribution to it. But the real creative process is about compiling together things. The same thing applies to visual arts and music. The same thing applies to cooking and comedy. It's about taking what already exists and looking at it through a new type of lens and combining it with something else to create something creative, to create something new. Computers are nowhere near being able to pull that off because they can't. It just requires too much of the human brain. Does that mean that the creative mind is superior to other types of brains? Well, yeah, to a certain degree, I guess, but you know what I mean? What this is meaning for you and I as artists, as anybody in the creative field, is that moving forward, our role as an artist is no longer going to be, I'm sorry, it's scorching hot in Montreal, is no longer going to be being at the bottom of the food chain, selling his little portraits, doing his little caricatures on the side of the road. The role of an artist is going to be one of these few remaining human-based jobs that automation will not be able to replace. Our value as artists is, and will continue to grow in importance as we move forward. So this just further emphasizes the fact that we are at a crossroads, at a turning point in the artistic world as we know it today. That's something we have not seen, if maybe ever. So if you're sitting there contemplating whether or not to pursue a career in art, contemplating whether or not it's a viable career choice, the answer is it is. It very much is. I've made a very good living for myself doing so, confided. I did my homework. I've worked really hard. I've gained the skills, and I've worked on these skills that I needed to be able to build a career, to make myself employable, how to handle myself in a professional manner, all of those important things, yes. But I'm no longer sitting there sending my application to 200 different studios and getting no replies. I'm actually finding regular work because now I can access the online world, as can you. So this is a little bit of food for thought for you. Hopefully it's been a help. Hopefully it'll help you get yourself off your ass and pursue your career with a little bit more vigor and purpose. Remember, I have my LUCIDPIXUL online mentorship. Go and check all the information is down below. And remember the Brush Sauce Theater with myself and Tyler Edlin, which is an absolutely awesome community of artists and a big community of people out there to help you. And anything that I've spoken about with regards to all these innovations in robotics and everything like that, I'm going to make sure to leave links below. And if you have any information, if you've seen any things or anything you want to contribute to this conversation, then please let us know in the comments below. All right, so remember to subscribe, give it a big thumbs up, and I will see you soon. Take care.